I am Kyle, and this is my wife Dolores. We are retired and our hobby is camping. We had bought a 40-foot diesel pusher when we retired, and we wanted to travel around the US, especially out west, stopping at the beautiful, peaceful campgrounds that we had read about in camping magazines. When it was time to go, we packed our belongings and started our journey going west. Our dreams were coming true, and we were very excited to be on the road with our new home. We started in Tennessee, drove through Kentucky, and stopped at a KOA in Missouri. It was the first camping spot that we had stayed in with our new motorhome, and it was a very peaceful night. The next morning, we awoke to a beautiful sunrise and ate our breakfast on the picnic table just outside our door. We were enjoying our newfound freedom and the place that we picked to stay, but we had to get back on the road because I wanted to get as much driving on this day in order to make it to our first destination, Mount St. Helens, Washington. My family and I had visited Mount St. Helens when I was a child, and I remember how beautiful the place was before the great volcanic eruption. I have always wanted to go back to the peaceful beauty of the old growth trees and the lake we had enjoyed as a family, but never had the time to do so. Now that I am retired, I do have the time. We had finally made it to the campground close to the mountain that we had come to see. It was on a back road very far from anything, but that is what Dolores and I liked. When we approached the campground, we noticed there were a few motorhomes that had claimed a spot, and some of them looked to be long-term residents. We drove around until we found the perfect spot to stay for a 2-week duration. We drove to the back of the campground and unhooked the small car we had towed behind the motorhome, backed into the gravel spot, and set up camp. We had the back of the campground to ourselves for the first half of the day until other campers started coming in, making the campground full to maximum capacity. However, we didn't stress about it. We did enjoy the company and found new friends with the campers that came that day. As evening turned into night, my wife and I decided it was time to go to bed. Our neighbors were having an enjoyable time around the campfire, being somewhat loud, but that didn't bother me because I am a heavy sleeper, and we use a floor fan to drown out any outside noises, and I slept very well that night. The next morning, I opened the door on the side of the motorhome and noticed how beautiful the morning was. The birds were singing, the sun was bright, and the breeze was cool and refreshing. I also noticed that our neighbors that were sitting around the campfire the night before had packed up and were gone. I thought that was strange because they had told me they were going to stay for a week at the campground. I walked to the bathhouse to take my shower while Dolores used the shower in the motorhome. As I made my way there, I saw that the others were also packing up and moving out. I threw my hand up to say a greeting to them as they were putting their lawn chairs in the side compartment, and I kept walking to the bathhouse. "You're packing up and leaving too, aren't you?" I heard as I passed their coach. At first, I didn't know that the man who said those words was talking to me, but when I turned to look, I noticed he was looking at me and waving for me to stop and talk to him. I told him that we had booked our camping spot for 2 weeks, and we wanted to explore a lot of the area before moving on to our next destination. The look on his face was a mixture of disbelief and fright. "Did you not hear what happened last night with the people that were camped next to you?" he said, pointing at the empty camp spot next to our motorhome. "The ones that stayed up all night around the campfire?" I asked as I watched the man's head nod in a yes answer. I explained to him that we used the fan to drown out any outside noise, and we had not heard a thing. That is when he told me what had happened. As he was telling me about the incidents that took place the night before, I noticed that other campers were packing up and leaving as well. He explained to me that the campers around the campfire were drinking and being very loud, hence keeping the rest of the residents from getting any sleep. But that wasn't why everyone was hurriedly packing their belongings and leaving. He said that he and his wife listened to the party going on that night, but they finally settled down, and what came next frightened the hell out of them. There were strange yells and screams coming from the thick woods at the end of the campground. They were very loud, and not of any animal that I had ever heard. He went on to tell me that the partygoers were getting attacked with rocks being thrown at them, and they were screaming, saying they saw a huge ape-like creature lurking in the woods close to their motorhome. He and his wife came out of their home and witnessed the partygoers' motorhome rocking from side to side so feverishly to the point that it almost turned over on its side, and the smell that permeated the air was so strong that it made him want to vomit. When we heard the people inside the motorhome screaming and the creature's growls and yells, we were frightened and returned inside our home. "We are leaving today and never coming back here," he said as he turned around and waved goodbye to me. I continued my walk to the bathhouse, thinking that either the man that I just talked to was going crazy or there was something strange going on in these woods. I also thought that my wife and I would not have to worry about the loud neighbors from this point on, until our time we had paid for was up, and we were ready to leave. I was hesitant telling Dolores about the conversation with the camper I had earlier, but she was curious as to why everyone was packing up and leaving in a hurry. I told her not to worry so much about it, and we will be left alone in the park like we had wished. She agreed, and we went out for the day to explore our new surroundings. After a long day hiking in the parks and enjoying the small town we had passed on our way back to the campground, it was time to go back and relax around our campfire. I had the fire going, and we cooked our dinner of steaks and baked potatoes on the big grill the campground had furnished. We were having an enjoyable time relaxing by the fire, drinking our adult beverages, and listening to the sounds of the crickets at dusk that surrounded us. I reached down and pulled an ice-cold can of beer from the cooler that was sitting next to my lounge chair, and popped the top to take a swig, when suddenly I heard a strange scream coming from the woods behind our motorhome. I looked at my wife and noticed that she heard the same thing, and with wide eyes she started to look around to see if anything was near us, and I could see that she was getting a little concerned. But what had my attention was the fact that as soon as we heard the long guttural scream coming from the woods, the crickets stopped their chirping and the forest became eerily silent. Soon after, the crickets resumed chirping again, but not as loud, and I started to relax and took a sip from my beverage. That's when we heard another terrorizing scream, and this time it sounded much closer to us than the first time. It was completely dark now, and we could not see anything outside other than what the campfire was illuminating, and I could tell Dolores was ready to go in for the night. I smothered the fire with dirt as best I could, and the charcoal in the grill was slowly dying out. However, the smell of freshly cooked meat still filled the air around our campsite. I folded the lounge chairs and propped them up beside the motorhome under the awning, and we went inside, locked the door, and turned on the television to watch a movie. My attention was on the movie we had put into the DVD player, and I had forgotten about the strange sounds that we had heard earlier, when suddenly, something huge hit the side of our motorhome. It startled me and brought me back into reality, but it also made me mad because I didn't want any dents in our new home, and whatever it was that hit it had to have surely made a dent. I jumped up to go look out the window on the side where the huge object had hit, when abruptly, we heard and felt something hitting the other side of the wall. That was it for me. I went into the back of the motorhome where the bedroom was and came out with a weapon I had stashed under the mattress before we started traveling. I went to the door to unlock it and was going to go outside to see what it was that was hitting the sides of the walls, when I was knocked back from the door as the motorhome started to rock back and forth from side to side. The 40-foot Class A motorhome was being rocked so violently, causing the items on the kitchen counters to be thrown to the floor. The television that we were watching was knocked off its hooks and landed on the sofa, and then crashed to the floor, and Dolores and I were knocked off our feet. With the sounds of everything breaking and being tossed around the motorhome, along with Dolores' screams, and the creaks and rattles of the motorhome itself, I didn't know what to do, and I started to panic. I couldn't get up and stand on my own 2 feet, for the shaking kept me glued to the floor, and I thought to myself, what the hell is going on? This attack lasted for about a minute, and then it abruptly stopped. I was still on the floor when I looked up and saw Dolores lying in front of me, her breathing labored, with a look of terror on her face. Panicked, I scrambled to my feet and started looking out the window to where I thought the creature was, when again the motorhome started to shake, but this time I held on to the rail to the door and looked outside. What I saw with my own 2 eyes was unbelievable to me, and I still have nightmares about it. At first, I could not make out what I was looking at, but as I stared at the creature that was shaking the motorhome, I could feel my heart dropping to my feet, and my blood ran cold. The creature stood about 7 to 8 feet tall, hair that covered the whole body, a giant cone head, and I could see the muscles protruding from its arms. This thing was huge. While still shaking the coach, the creature turned his head and noticed me in the window. That is when I saw its face. The eyes had a slight red glow to them, and the mouth was shaped in an angry expression with its teeth showing. As we stared at each other, the creature stopped shaking the motor home and started to growl. I do not know how long we had stared at each other, but before I could move, I saw the creature's mouth open, and then the loudest guttural scream came out that tore through my body and went right to my soul. The next thing I remember, I was lying flat on my back on the floor with my wife hovering over me, crying and screaming for me to wake up. When I came to my senses, I noticed that everything was quiet, and the motor home had stopped rocking. I got up nervously to look out the window to see if the massive creature had gone. The Bigfoot was nowhere around as far as I could see, and Dolores and I never slept that night. We couldn't wait to pack our belongings and leave. We would have left that night. However, our small car was sitting in front of the motorhome, and I was not going to go out to move it and hook it to the coach. We waited until daylight before we decided to go outside. We accessed the damage of what the creature did to our new home. The damage was unbelievable. There were dents and scratches that went all around the camper, and it looked as if we had been in a war zone. But at that moment, the damage was the least of my worries. I couldn't wait to get the hell out of that place. I hurriedly moved the car out of the way and packed all our belongings, put the car on the hitch, and we left. We didn't stop at the campground office to even tell them that we were leaving in order to get the refund for the 2-week stay that we had paid for. I just wanted to get out of there as quickly as possible. If I had only one wish, I would have wished I had heeded the warning that the fellow camper had told me, and I wish we would have left that campground with the rest of the campers. After the incident, we could hardly wait to get back home to Tennessee and park the motorhome. We also sold it for a very discounted price, and we haven't went camping since.